Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Johngy podcast, without which life would be incomplete and have little or no meaning. I, of course, am professional podcaster. Who else but Tommy else? And with me, as always, is my compatriot, uh, my wingman, my man at arms, coming to us from Skokie, Illinois, the man on the beat from johngysbeat.com, Mr. Jonathan Partucci Robleski.
Tucci, yeah, that's yeah. Wrong again. Nice try though.
WPW or JPW, Jonathan Parducci Robleski. No,
Wrong. Wrong. Keep trying though. 0 for 59.
my psych, my high school psych teacher was named Mr. Parducci, and he was very Italian.
I believe there was a corner store by my grandmother's house when I was a youth. That was called Parducci's.
Well, that might
In the
have been
days when you had corner stores.
it might have been a family business you were unaware of.
Oh, I'm sure.
Being a maybe like it was your mother's maiden name Parducci. Maybe that's why they made that your middle name.
No, my mother's maiden name was Di Filippo, son of.
So would I be wrong in saying that your middle name could be Jonathan Di Filippo Robleski?
You'd be wrong. It could be, but it's not.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so
I'm sure the
didn't
listeners are fascinated by the tales of my missing
get your middle name right this time.
Yeah.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm excited tonight for our guest. It's always good to have it's always good to have a guest. I love talking to you, but I love talking to others more.
See, now you're breaking one of the podcast rules. We're supposed to keep this evergreen so people don't know whether it's like daytime, nighttime, whatever. Now,
Well, the fact that you got your window there with the sun shining brightly.
I was just about to say, I know that if you're watching this, you can see that the daylight is clearly blaring into my room here. However, could be somebody listening to this in the wee hours of the night, and they might think that, we're having a quiet evening discussion with somebody, or maybe they're driving to work and they'd like to think that this is happening in the morning. Either way, it doesn't matter. Tell everybody who our guest is today.
Well, I actually met our guest is Lauren Traut of the Patch news site. I actually met Lauren probably 10 years ago. I don't even know if she'd remember. She was working a fest representing the Patch. And I'll
Patch
tell you,
Fest? Was it Patch Fest?
it was not Patch Fest. It was
Oh.
it was a community. I'm not even sure which community it was.
PatchCon?
No, but I will say this: anybody, especially from a newspaper or a website like that, that works a fest, I immediately have respect for, because when I worked for Learner newspapers for way too many years, I was in charge of marketing as well as any other thing, because I wore a lot of hats because it was a small and very cheap company. And I worked way too many fests, giving out newspapers and trying to get subscribers and all that, meeting the readers. So, I immediately had an instant respect for her. But since then, I followed her online. She's had various jobs with the Patch. And the thing that really appeals to me is she has such a deep passion for journalism, real meaty journalism. And I think that's missing in a lot of people today. And I think Lauren gives journalism a good name.
Well, that's good. Do you still have all those hats? Do you have like a big hat rack or something in your closet or something like that?
No, but you know what? My dad
From
probably has my old learner hats, because he doesn't throw anything out. He's got a T-shirt that I gave him. I swear to God, one of the last times I was at his house, he had a learner T-shirt that I gave him in 1988.
Well, yeah, you got your shirt's worth out of it. That's good. Well, all right. Well, with all of that, why don't we get to our guest and introduce the lovely Miss Lauren Traut.
For the John GRL's podcast, welcome into our studios a journalist I really admire, Lauren Traut. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing great.
So you
we're
got
excited to talk journalism.
You got a patch glass there.
I sure do.
Now, did you pick that out because you knew you were coming on the show, or is that a regular glass anyway?
That's a pretty regular glass. It's either that or a Patch coffee mug. So
Oh, so you're just living off the swag. Yeah.
yeah. It's lasted a long time. These glasses are about 12 years old. So
Yeah.
When did you get interested in journalism?
I think, from a young age, I always liked writing. And I was always a really curious kid. And then when I was in high school, I worked very briefly I went to Mother Macaulay in Chicago. And I worked very briefly for the high school newspaper, and kind of started to enjoy that. And then really got into it in college. I went to U of I in Champaign, and my first day on campus, I went straight to the newsroom and said, I want to write.
Mhm.
So from then on, I got bit by the bug. So it's grabbed hold of me.
Now, I know you've been with the Patch a long time. Was that your first real journalism job outside of college?
It was not. So my first job out of college was with a company that is now defunct called 22nd Century Media. And they were a chain of, at first, South suburban newspapers started by the former politician Jack Ryan. And so I actually ran the Frankfurt newspaper for 3 years. And so it was a weekly that went out via U.S. Postal Service, every Thursday. So that was my first job. And it was a doozy of one. I was pretty much a one-woman show there. I was taking the photos, writing the stories, doing everything but laying out the pages. So,
Wow.
yeah, learned real quick, learned on my feet.
Well, that's sometimes the old trial by fire is the way to do it, though. You just got to get tossed into the action, and then you learn how to swim.
Yep, for sure.
Was it a hard transition then to go from print to the Patch, which is obviously internet based?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was hard. It was definitely a change of pace. Going from a weekly where, we at the time, I know they evolved, after I left, but at the time we really had no way to even break news, or there was no urgency to what we were doing. It was pretty much as long as everything made it to the printer on time for our weekly deadline, we were fine. But there was really no way to engage with people. We didn't have social media. We had no newsletters. We had nothing that was really impactful as far as engagement and analytics, where we could see what people were reading and what they were connecting with. So coming to Patch, one of the most amazing things when I started at the Oak Forest Patch site, which did not exist before I came to Patch. Being able to see how many people were on the site at any given moment, and seeing how many people were reading each article, and actually being able to keep track of those analytics was a huge, it was very refreshing. It was a breath of fresh air after so long of not knowing who was reading my stuff and wondering if people were lining their bird cages with my newspaper.
Yeah. No,
So
I'm sure it was motivating because you knew, like you said, you knew people were, and it was probably interesting to see, what the demographics were and where they're from and the ages, and and just all that, who it was. But yeah, it's nice. It is nice knowing somehow that people are seeing your work.
One of the things I really admire about you, though, is your passion. I followed you, even though I live on the north side. I have south side roots. My sister lives out in Tinley. I follow your stuff online. Does being that passionate, does that sometimes cause you headaches in terms of covering some stories that you just get too emotional about?
I think it's definitely hard to turn it off. I think I'm probably more impacted by some stories more than other people might be. I I obviously care about my towns, and I care about the people in them. So when tragedy happens, you know,
Sure.
there's a lot of tears that are shed. And I think people sometimes assume that journalists are kind of cold-hearted and you know, detached because we do a not so easy job, and we have to do it efficiently. And sometimes we have to share grisly or terrible details about something, and people think that
Mhm.
doesn't get to us. And there's been a
Yeah.
lot of times of crying in my car, updating a breaking news story, you know, from the scene. So, and as far, you know, overall with the job, um, it's hard not to, you know, if I see a story pop up on the weekend, it's hard not to jump online and want to do it right then in the moment. But
Right.
if I work 7 days a week, I'm going to get real resentful and really
Yeah. No,
and really
you're
burnt out.
yeah, journalists aren't robots, you know. I mean, you're real people who this information has to filter through emotionally, and then you have to find a way to deliver that, you know, that information respectfully, but also with the accurate details and of everything. And that, I'm sure, is not always the easiest thing to do because the details are not often pleasant.
But that brings up
You
another
snooze.
point. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that brings up another point. In terms of like, you know, you're a real journalist. You know, I followed you for a long time. I read the patch. I know you're a journalist. But you know, there's people out there that call themselves journalists, and they're interested in just getting news or getting, you know, whatever story is out there immediately. And the facts could be damned at times, as long as I get it out there first. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there are a lot of people who, and I think, you know, social media comes into play in a big way with that type of concept where everyone wants to be the person with the information. Everyone wants to be the person with the scoop. And it goes down to even residents, you know, sharing, you know, they heard police talking about something on their block and they posted on Facebook, and then it spirals and people, it turns into something that it's not. But I do think there are people who, you know, they get some gratification out of thinking that they're spreading the word about something, and they don't do their homework and they don't do their legwork. And then it does jeopardize our reputations. And then it makes us have to work 10 times harder to gain the trust of local officials and police chiefs and fire chiefs. And I'm lucky that most of my mayors and all, you know, my local officials know that I want to do right by the communities. Doesn't mean we're always going to be on the same page with what is newsworthy, and I think they understand that. And sometimes I'm going to have to write about something that, you know, ruffles their feathers, and it's unfortunate, but it's got to be done. But to your original point, I think there are a lot of people who kind of become keyboard commandos and, you know, make makeshift journalists, and I wish they'd stop. But I think there's that nature to people nowadays that they want information immediately, and they want, you know, that gratification immediately. And as long as there are people who are seeking it in that way, there are going to be the people who, you know, fire away at a keyboard and don't do their homework and get things wrong, unfortunately.
Equally,
Because
equally so, though, and I think this is where it's important that, you know, you're doing what you're doing, though, is for the people who do want to get past the clickbait and actually get to a real story, a real piece of information. That's where it's important that people like you are still out there doing it, so that we don't just completely lose ourselves to the, you know, the 5-second headline and that's it, you know. Like,
right.
it's good that, you know, that you're out there doing it.
Well, thank you. I
You're
think so. I think
you're
so
really
too.
out there. You know, you're always at, and I'm not just socially. I mean, you're out there like in the communities, at the restaurants, at the, you know, the pubs or wherever, willing to meet your readers, your community. That's
Yep.
got to feel good for them to know that you're out there in the bushes, you know, covering everything.
I hope so. I mean, I really make an effort to make myself accessible. And that's been something I've always done at Patch. I mean, I've been here almost 13 years. And from the beginning, I always made it a point to be very, you know, visible and reachable. And I wanted people to feel like I was an advocate for them when they needed me. And that I was, in the trenches for them as well when they need information or they need facts. And I think Patch accomplishes that quite well in many of our communities in a way that's different than any other news coverage or any other media.
I think it is important because, yeah, when people know that you're not just sitting at a keyboard typing about their town, you know their town. You've walked up that street. You've been to that place. You've talked to people out there before. You might have friends in that area or whatever the case is. It's like it's real. You've been there. You're experiencing it. You're not talking about some place that you don't, that you've only read up on or heard through other people about, and that gives you legitimacy. And I think that therein is where people will find comfort and trust in your reporting.
I hope so. That's what I'm going for. So I sure hope so.
Not to change the subject, but slightly switch gear. Well, actually, it is changing the subject.
You are changing the subject.
I am changing the subject.
Yes.
You have a passion for horses, I know.
I do.
Could you tell us a little bit about that, like where it started? And I know you ride horses, but forgive me, I don't exactly know what you do in those competitions.
Sure. So I loved horses since I was a kid, and luckily my mom shares the passion with me. And so she always facilitated it for me. From the time I was, in 5th grade, I was dropped off at summer camp at a barn and dropped off at 6:30 in the morning with a bag lunch and picked up at 6 o'clock at night and spent all day cleaning stalls and brushing horses and doing horse crafts and watching horse movies and taking lessons. And it was a really wonderful way to immerse myself in it. And, it stuck with me. It was a passion that really kind of lit me up and, gave me something to commit to as a kid and kept me out of trouble in high school. And my mom, again, also shares it with me. So we've had horses since I was about 12 years old. And so now we currently have 3 horses. And I compete. So I travel around the Midwest in the summers mostly, and I do something called 3-day eventing, which is the easiest way to sum it up is it's a triathlon for equestrians. There's 3 phases to it. There's dressage, which I'm sure people have heard mocked. It's the dancing horses where they kind of prance and do fancy figures and all that. And then there's cross country jumping, which is jumping over natural obstacles like banks and ditches and in and out of water and over stone walls, and it's timed, so you have to go fast but not too fast. And then
Sure.
the third phase is show jumping, which is a little bit like, well, it's not a little bit, it's probably what you see on TV with the more traditional poles that you can knock down.
Yeah.
So it's scored cumulatively. You want to do really well in the dressage phase. And dressage is a memorized test of movements that you do when you go in a ring that has letters around the outside. You do specific movements at specific points. You're being judged by one judge the entire time, and they're scoring each movement. So you want to do each movement really well on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 would be perfect. Actually, there's 0, so 0 means you don't do it at all. Never had one of those, luckily.
That's good.
But you want to do really well on each movement, and then they add all your points together and subtract it from a coefficient, and then you get your base score. And then from there, you want to not accumulate any other penalty points throughout the rest of the competition. So it's a little bit like golf in that the lower your score, the better you're going to fare against your competition. But it's challenging. It's, the stars all have to align to win one of these shows.
So I would imagine there's just a lot of training that goes into, working the horse to be able to get them to do that and everything. I mean, like that must take a lot of time out of your time, I would think.
It's about 5-6 days a week of riding every day. I ride,
Wow.
45 minutes.
Wow.
I spend a lot of time taking lessons, and it's something that someone just said to me the other day, haven't you been riding your whole life, and why do you still need lessons? And I said, well, because today my horse woke up on the wrong side of the bed and he had an attitude and I have to learn how to deal with that. Or
Yeah.
today he was afraid of something in the corner of the arena that he wasn't afraid of yesterday, and I have to learn how to ride through that. It's a lot different when you're dealing with a partner that you don't speak the same language.
Sure. Sure.
They have a mind of their own. They have fears and you know, moods, and
Yeah, like everything else. Yeah.
it's all about learning them. So it's a lot of time. It's a big commitment, and but it's something that it's always the nice thing about it is yes, you're always competing against other people when you go to the shows, but it's also very easy to keep it in the mind frame of competing against yourself and just wanting to improve upon your score from the last time.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a community too, because you're there with a bunch of other like-minded people who love doing the same thing that you're doing. You know, even whether it's a competition or not. Uh, Years ago, I used to do bodybuilding competitions, and I basically was of the same mind. Like I'm only competing with myself. You know, how everyone else does, or whether I go home with a trophy or not, it doesn't matter. It's how did I do this year compared to the year before? You know, that's all that really mattered. And then everything after that, you're just there with a bunch of people who are into the same thing as you know, and it's a fun time. So, I mean, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Um, and so, man, so you're riding at least 45 minutes a day. So you guys have three horses. Is there one is there one that's like your horse, or do you guys just all collectively just have, you know, like the horses and you equally, you know, use them?
Yeah. So we pretty much consider them, they belong to me and my mom.
Yeah.
So the two of the three horses that we have now, one is actually the baby of our first horse who we bought when I was 12 and has since passed away.
Yeah.
Um, but so it's her baby and he's 18 now. So
Wow.
he's retired. He just eats grass and lives a happy life as a horse.
What's the average lifespan for a horse? I have no idea.
Probably about mid-20s. So he's getting up there. But I've definitely seen horses live into their 30s or 40s.
Oh wow.
So he's retired. He just hangs out and he's a lawn ornament. But he lives a great life.
Yeah.
So his name is Finn. He's 18. And then our second horse is Jammy. And he is 11. He was my most recent competition horse who was diagnosed with a chronic lameness last summer. So he also is rendered unusable at this point. He can't be ridden for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So he's also a lawn ornament. He's beautiful. He's black and white spotted. So he's wonderful to look at.
Yeah.
So they both live at my parents. My parents have a small farm in Manhattan. And then we recently purchased our new guy, whose name is Miller. And he is 7 years old, so old enough that he's not scary for me to ride, but young enough that there's still some work for me to do training wise. So that's the one that's kind of my main guy now. We just bought him in December, so.
And I know you said that you're taking lessons to learn how to deal with some of that stuff, but like, you know, when you have a horse that is like that, you know, I know that I don't know, they use the term breaking in, you know, or breaking a horse or whatever. I mean, is that essentially what you have to do? Is you got to like, is it teaching the horse to respect you? Is it creating a mutual bond between you that you can communicate and learn how to work with the horse in its mood, whatever it may be that day?
Sure. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's about creating a partnership and learning how, every horse is a little bit different. So, like my Finn horse was very spooky and it was very difficult to ride him in a show because he would be scared of something different every time. And it was
Yeah.
very
Very
frustrating to me.
unpredictable. Yeah.
And so to be able to, I could practice until the cows came home with him and still go to a show and be
He'll find
completely
something new. Yeah.
completely caught off guard. So part of it is establishing a partnership with them and knowing, their ins and outs and their tendencies and their bad habits and, their fears and insecurities. And then part of it too is, making sure that we function well together as a team, that, he's listening to my cues very, and that I'm giving him the cues the right way. Every horse likes things a little bit different, and likes to be, some horses like to be piloted a little bit more, whereas others, you might be able to not be so aggressive, as a rider. So
Right.
it's all about learning them, and figuring out how to best work with them. So it's kind of a mix of all of that.
Very
How
cool.
many competitions do you typically do in a summer or a year?
So I would say in a summer, probably about six in a summer, 6 or 7. They're weekends, so kind of depends on, how everything else lines up in life. Can't miss too many family parties or kids' birthdays and all that good stuff. But probably about 6 or 7. And then in the winters, sometimes we will send him south.
Mhm.
Our trainer is based in Barrington, but she winters. This season she wintered in Ocala, Florida. In the past, she's wintered in Aiken, South Carolina. So sometimes we'll send him there with her so that he can stay moving in, the milder weather. Because we
Yeah.
lose a good chunk of time up here,
I was
December.
actually going to ask about that, because I was going to say, I mean, in Chicago, I mean, yeah, you got a nice long stretch of weather that's just probably too cold for the horses to be out doing anything, I mean, so, you can have weeks where, I mean, like, we're not leaving the house, so why, it's like,
Right.
so yeah, so you send them south for the winter.
Yeah, well, and we have indoor arenas and whatnot, but a lot of them in most boarding barns aren't heated. So it's cutting out the wind, but the
It's
wind,
still cold. Yeah.
it's still cold. So pretty much my rule is if it's below 20, I'm not riding it, because if it's below 20 degrees, I'm miserable. They're
Yeah, you
probably
don't want to be out there either. Yeah, of course.
right. So sending them south definitely keeps them moving, and then I'm able to go down there for chunks of time and ride and in the sun and the warmth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my hobby with that. It's a wild ride. My mom, loves doing it, and she's been my biggest cheerleader throughout it, and I think she kind of lives a little vicariously through me, because
Mhm.
she is not, she doesn't like. She's actually had more accidents riding than I have. So, right, understandably so, she will not ever ride again, which
A little
is
wary
fine.
of it now. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. She's broken more bones doing it than I have. So, I'm the one who runs a 1,200-pound animal at solid obstacles. So, who knows?
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we let you go, I have to ask you, the Illini,
Oh,
what happened? Look, hey, I went to DePaul, so at least you guys know what winning is.
I love the roll of the eyes and just the exasperated look.
break my heart every way to Sunday. Yeah. So I think we had a bunch of young players this year that never maybe really got a full chance to kind of vibe together and gel together. And we looked great at the beginning of the season, and then we had some injuries and some concussion protocols, and I think that hurt us for a few games. And I think, unfortunately, they just never they never learned how not to panic. And that was the hardest thing to watch, because you'd watch the game get away from a little bit, and it still seemed doable, but it was like their heads were spinning and they just couldn't, get back on the same page. So it's frustrating as a fan to watch. I'll never not be a fan. I was at U of I when they made their title run in 2005. Was a fan before then, but that season just was magical and cemented it for me that I would be an Illini basketball fan for life. I love Brad Underwood. I think he's a great coach. I think he recruits really well. I just think this season we just couldn't get our acts together. It was very frustrating.
But there's hope for the future. Like next season, things look good.
There's always next season. Well, I can tell you, as a Cubs fan, you have to have that mentality of there's always next season, and You'll love them. I'll love them regardless. I'll always be a Cub fan. They can lose every game from here until eternity, and I'll
Yeah.
still want to go to Wrigley, and I'll still wear the red, white, and blue. So
Yeah.
I hear you.
But I think we're talking to a Sox fan here, I think, right?
I mean, I grew up Evergreen Park, so I definitely grew up South Side, Sox fan. I never even set foot in Wrigley until I was in grad school, and Illinois played Northwestern in football at Wrigley.
Oh,
And that was
yeah,
my first time in Wrigley. And so that just shows you, I spent a lot of time at
yeah.
Comiskey. It's Comiskey. I don't care.
Always.
It
Right.
is
Oh,
Comiskey. Yes, thank you. Yes, it is not US Cellular or whatever the heck they're calling it
guaranteed
right now.
rate. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, guaranteed rate field. Oh God, I just cannot stand the corporate names of fields at this point.
Yeah.
It's just I can't. Yeah, Comiskey was fine. I was
Yeah.
perfectly good with that. So
Hey, I grew up on this. I grew up just east of you in like the South Chicago area, like underneath the Skyway.
Okay.
Long time White Sox fan. It will be. It's always Comiskey Park. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah. But to your point, to your question, is there hope for next season? Yes. I know we lost Terrence Shannon Jr., who came into, he was just a transfer this year and he's a senior, so he's gone. But Dane Danger just said he's coming back, which is huge. He was a pretty significant contributor for us as a center. And we've got a lot of young players. And I imagine Underwood will be hitting the transfer portal pretty hard to get us some new blood as well. So I have faith, and he just renewed his contract, I think, a year ago. So we've got him for a few more years. So I think as these players kind of grow up a little bit together, and I think they were all equally disappointed by this season. So my hope is that kind of lights a fire under them for next season. So I think I have a friend who is a devout Marquette fan, and the Big Ten is so overrated. It's such an overrated conference. Although with our tournament, performance this year, I can't say I disagree with him, because we definitely choked real early as a conference. But so I would love to see someone from the Big Ten do well. So hopefully it'll be the Illini, but I don't know. I'm losing a little bit of faith, but I'll have it back by next season.
Yeah, you got time to recover.
that's why they give you the time off, so that you'll get over it and forget about it and come back fresh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all right, Lauren, we've taken enough of your time, but thank you so much for coming on the show and being with us and talking to us about your journalism and your equestrian endeavors and everything. It's been real nice getting to know you and get to talk to you and everything.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
And thanks for your work down there. I know, like I said, my family and friends that live down there still, they are faithful Patch readers, and they appreciate everything you do.
Awesome. Well, tell them I say thank you for reading, and to let me know if I start slacking, and I'll make sure to fix it.
I don't see that as a problem with you, but yes.
I hope not. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Lauren.
All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
And that was Lauren Traut of the Patch, one of my favorite sites. As you know, I'm a contributor. I'm nowhere near the status of Lauren, but I do contribute some of my pieces on various Patch news sites. But Lauren does a fantastic job there.
Yeah. She, unlike you, is not a keyboard commando, as she said.
I'm not a keyboard. I'm fluff. I'm not a keyboard commando. I'm a fluff writer.
Well, you got some fluff for sure, but no, she was great, and it's interesting to see, and we've talked about this a million times before on with other people, but you start off on one path, towards something. She wanted to do journalism. She was working at that paper. She was more or less running the paper. And this is before social media and all that stuff. And then suddenly that all changes. And now she finds herself in this position, and she's doing something for 13 years, that she loves. And, it's probably wasn't what she had envisioned originally, but found her place, found her people. And that's very cool. And again, you were making the point that she's a legitimate journalist in a world where everybody claims to be, a journalist or something of that sort, just because they've got an Instagram page or something like that. Like, she's actually out there And like I said, with her being, part of the community, I really think it validates her her reporting, because that she's one of the people.
Yeah. Well, I stressed it. I think I stressed it enough, but the thing that really I admire about her is she, if you follow her online, if you read her stuff in the patch, she has such passion for the area. She has such passion for news. You can see her, she wears her heart on her sleeve sometimes in the best of ways. She just cares about everything that she does. And it's refreshing. And I'm not condemning other journalists or all journalists, but when you get somebody like Lauren who stands out in that field, it's really impressive.
In any endeavor, when you see somebody who it's just plain as day that they really care about what they're doing, you really are that much more invested in seeing and being a part of what they're doing in whatever way you can consume that. So so I agree 100%. And then as far the equestrian thing, I think is very cool. I like I was telling you before the show, I I know it's kind of a loose way in there, but I've been watching, I watched Yellowstone, and it's within the course of the show, they kind of, you learn little things about how they work with horses and how they train them, and they show them at rodeos and shows and stuff, which are not the same thing that she's doing, but it's same principle in a lot of ways, like the dancing kind of thing with the horse, and certain footwork, and teaching them how to do that and all that. And yeah, like she said, it's a 1,200-pound animal that can toss you and outrun you and boot you in the face. And I can't imagine what it's like to try to have a symbiotic relationship and control with that animal, and to be riding every day like that. I mean, that's devotion, and that's, again, it's passion. She's
even obviously she wants to win the competition. She wants to do well in the competitions, but you can tell her passion really is just to be with that horse, and the competition is sort of like a backdrop. I'm sure she enjoys the competition, but her passion are her horses.
It's sometimes it's nice just to have, like a goal with it, and that kind of keeps you on the ball with doing something like that. But yeah, it's always about the journey and never about the prize or the destination. It's that is a very fleeting moment, no matter how great it might be in that moment. But everything that leads up to that moment is the stuff that's the best and is what really matters. So so I thought that was very fascinating and very cool. And I like hearing about, like, you got to move the horse around, get it out of the cold air and bring it down south, and make sure it keeps running and moving and everything. And I'd imagine she probably needs to go visit it once in a while to keep the relationship up with it too, so the animal doesn't think it was deserted or whatever. And I mean,
and besides working with the horses, how much of your own training do you have to do? Strength training, whether it's legs or back or arms or whatever. I'm sure endurance. I'm sure there's a lot of exercise workouts that she has to do just on her own to maintain that.
Well, I think it's also one of those things where, the simple act of doing it, though, is training those muscles too.
Sure.
Though. It's you get the muscles she needs to work to do that, she will strengthen by doing it. But that's why I'm like, to hear that she's riding 6 days a week at an hour a shot or whatever it was. I mean, that's a workout,
Oh yeah.
I mean, you gotta hold on to that horse, man. I mean,
no, you're absolutely
and you
right.
don't have to be going that fast to be really, making sure you're on there, So, but if she's flying along and jumping over poles and stuff, then, and that's another thing, impact and on your back and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't do it, man. I haven't ridden a horse in a long time, but I did used to go a little bit with my dad back in the day. And man, I mean, I don't know if you ever ridden a horse.
The carousel in front of the jewel doesn't count.
Take it easy. Have you ever ridden a horse before?
I have. Yeah, I mean, not anywhere near that level.
No. I've ridden it on like a trail and stuff, but I mean, when you get on that animal, I mean, you have to respect that that's a lot of animal underneath you. That's
Yeah.
a lot of muscle. And oh boy. I mean, that thing, woo, it's like,
Yeah.
it's wild. It's a lot of power there that, so, but anyway, well, it was great having her on. It was good to learn some new things about all of both the journalism, the equestrian, and get a little inside thoughts from an Illinois fan. So
we covered all bases. She's like a Renaissance woman.
yeah, there you go. All right, John. Well, I think we're just gonna cut straight to the quick, and I'm going to say, for the Johngy or Else podcast, I of course have been who else but Tommy Else, and with me as always, the man on the beat from JohnG'sBeat.com, Mr. John Robleski.